The fire is low, the night quiet, and somewhere in the folds of history, the Vikings are awake. They were farmers, and they were raiders, they were traders, and sometimes poets. They lived with cattle, and they lived with storms. But there is one part of them that has lingered in the imagination like a half-remembered dream. The berserkers, men who fought without armor. Men who howled like wolves and foamed like the sea. Men who seemed to feel neither pain nor fear, and perhaps, if the old sagas are to be believed, men who had eaten something strange before, batle a mushroom small, red, and speckled with white, the Amanita muscaria, the so-called magic mushroom of the north. Tonight, we will walk slowly through this story. We will tread the ground of Norse farms and frozen forests. We will listen to the sagas and to whispers of archaeology. And we will wonder together what mushrooms had to do with rage. So, lie back, breathe in. Imagine the smell of pine smoke and damp earth. And let us step into the quiet madness of the Viking berserker. The word comes from Old Norse berserker. It might mean bare shirt, or it might mean bare shirt. Bare shirt would mean a warrior without armor, a man who cast aside mail and shield and trusted only his body and his fury. Bare shirt would mean something else, a man who wore the skin of the animal, who became the bear, who fought with the strength and growl of something not quite human. Both meanings linger. Both are possible. Perhaps both were true at different times for different men. The sagas describe them in gentle repetition. They were fearless. They bit their shields. They were strong as oxen, and sometimes stronger. They were hard to kill. And when the fury passed, they were weak and pale. Some say they were the shock troops of Viking war bands, a handful of men who would run screaming at the enemy, terrifying them, breaking the line before the rest of the warriors even arrived. Others suggest something quieter. Perhaps they were not many. Perhaps they were just stories told by firelight, the kind of stories that grow larger with every telling, like bread swelling in the oven. Still, something about the berserkers has remained, something odd, something a little frightening. Now to mushrooms, the Amanita muscaria. You may know it already, even if you do not think you do. It is the mushroom of fairy tales, the red cap with white spots, the mushroom that gnomes sit upon in old illustrations, the one Alice might have nibbled on, to grow tall or shrink small. It grows in the north, in birch forests, in pine forests, on the damp ground where moss and roots intertwine. For Vikings, it would not have been rare, it was simply there, a part of the landscape as much as reindeer or ravens. But it is not a gentle mushroom. It is not the mild, earthy flavoring you might slice into stew. It is toxic. It can make you sick, sweating, vomiting, shaking, but it can also make you feel very strange. Some who have eaten it describe waves of energy as if lightning were buzzing under the skin. Others describe visions, distortions of sound, of color, of the edge between dream and waking, a sense of being larger than life, untouchable, almost divine. This is where the theory begins that Viking berserkers used these mushrooms, that they swallowed them before battle, that the rage was not only in the blood, but also in the mushroom. The idea first appeared in the 18th century. A man named Samuel Udman suggested it. He looked at the sagas and at the descriptions of madness and strength, and he thought of Amanita muscaria. He thought of the way Siberian shamans had used the mushroom in ritual. He joined the dots and he made a guess. It was a neat guess, a tidy one. The berserker trance could be explained not only by psychology or belief, but by chemistry. Mushrooms as fuel for fury. Imagine it. A group of warriors sitting in the shadows of the trees, passing around red-capped fungi, chewing them slowly or brewing them into a bitter drink, waiting for the sickness to pass and for the energy to rise. Then staggering to their feet, eyes wide, hearts pounding, ready to hurl themselves at their enemies with something beyond courage. It is an image that lingers. It feels like it should be true, but history is not always so simple. Not everyone agrees with the mushroom theory. Some scholars argue that it is too neat, too romantic. There are no direct sources from the Viking Age that mention mushrooms, not in sagas, not in poetry, not in chronicles written by monks. The idea is always secondhand, a modern guess looking backward. Some point out that Amanita muscaria, IS, unpredictable. Sometimes it makes you aggressive, sometimes it makes you drowsy, sometimes it only makes you ill, hardly the reliable tool of war. Others suggest different plants, the henbane, for example, a nightshade plant with yellow flowers. It can also cause visions, delirium, a sense of invulnerability. It grows in Northern Europe too, and archaeological finds suggest it was known to the Norse. And then there is another idea, that no plants were needed at all, that the berserker state was a psychological one, the result of ritual, of belief, of deliberate self-conditioning, a kind of meditation turned inside out. The human mind is strange. It can push itself beyond limits with enough training, enough story, enough pressure. Think of soldiers chanting. Think of monks fasting. Think of athletes who speak of the zone. Perhaps the berserkers found their own path into something like that. If it was not mushrooms, then perhaps it was ritual. The sagas hint at it. They describe warriors who fought in a frenzy, but also who collapsed afterward. The weakness after the storm, the pale skin, the shivering, the cost of the rage. It feels almost like a trance. Perhaps they howled together, perhaps they breathed in rhythm, perhaps they believed that they were becoming bears or wolves or gods. And belief is a powerful drug. Imagine a man stripping off his armor, painting his skin with ash, putting on a wolf pelt, and chanting with his brothers until he believed he was a wolf. Imagine him running at the enemy, teeth bared, certain that no blade could harm him, his body filled with adrenaline, his mind filled with certainty, his enemy filled with fear. Sometimes that is all it takes. The sagas are not always history. They are stories, told and retold, shaped like driftwood. But they give us glimpses. In the Ynglinga saga, berserkers are said to follow Odin, the one-eyed god of war and wisdom. They are described as fighting without armor, biting their shields, strong as bears or bulls. It says that neither fire nor iron could hurt them. Other sagas give us names: Kveldulf, the evening wolf, a man who grew stronger as the day grew darker, who raged like a beast when night came. Egil Skallagrimsson, a poet and a fighter, said to have berserker blood in his veins, a man who could compose verse one moment and split skulls the next. These characters straddle the line between legend and memory. Were they real? Perhaps parts of them were. Perhaps their rage was exaggerated, their mushrooms imagined, their strength inflated like bread rising in the oven. But something about them felt true enough that people kept repeating the stories, and that is what matters in culture. Not only what happened, but what was remembered. Berserkers were not always loved. In some sagas, they are heroes. In others, they are trouble. Wild men who could not live peacefully after war. One tale tells of berserkers demanding duels, terrorizing farmers, taking what they wished be. Their frenzy was not only useful in battle, but dangerous at home. Like fire, they warmed and destroyed. In later Christian texts, the tone grows darker still. Berserkers are described as cursed. Their trance is painted as demonic, unholy, a thing of the old pagan world. And so their place in memory shifts, from honored warriors to feared outcasts, to symbols of an older time fading into story. Modern science has its own guesses. What we call the fight or flight response might explain part of it. Adrenaline surges through the body in danger. It makes the heart pound, the muscles strong, the mind narrow and focused. Most people feel it for only a few moments, but perhaps berserkers found a way to stretch it out, to live in that storm for longer. Endorphins too dull pain. In moments of stress, the body can ignore wounds. Warriors have been known to keep fighting with injuries that should have dropped them. It is biology, not magic. Some psychologists compare the berserker state to dissociation, a breaking away from the self, a trance where fear is muted, where identity shifts. A person can believe they are more than human, and sometimes belief is enough to make it so. And still, there's room for mushrooms. Even if not proven, even if uncertain, the possibility lingers like a shadow. Because altered states are real. Plants and fungi can open doors in the mind, and it is easy to imagine a Viking sitting in the smoke of a fire, chewing something bitter and red, waiting for the world to tilt. The berserker was not unique. Other cultures, too, have found ways to enter rage. Among the Celts, there were warriors said to go into battle naked, painted blue, howling like madmen. Among some Native American groups, there were warrior societies who entered trance with drumming and dancing before war. In parts of Africa, warriors used plants and ritual to reach fearlessness. And in the modern world, soldiers still train to suppress fear, to push through pain, to become something more than ordinary men and women. The berserkers were one branch of a very large tree, a tree of humans seeking to overcome the limits of flesh, whether by prayer, by drum, by dance, or by mushroom. And now, the fire is lower still. The story of the berserkers is not finished, but it has become quiet. What do we truly know? We know that some warriors fought with unusual fury. We know that sagas remembered them and feared them and sometimes admired them. We know that mushrooms grow in the forests, red and white, tempting and dangerous. And we know that people across time have always sought to change themselves, to become stronger, braver, stranger, whether by ritual, by mushroom, or by sheer belief. The berserkers remind us that the human mind is not fixed. It bends, it breaks, it transforms. Sometimes it becomes a storm. So if you find yourself walking in a pine forest one day and you see the little red cap of an Amanita muscaria poking through the moss, you might pause. You might think of Vikings. You might think of berserkers. You might think of shield-biting men who felt like bears, and then you might smile and walk on. Because some mushrooms are better admired than eaten. History is full of things that are hard to prove, but easy to imagine. The berserkers sit among them, halfway between fact and dream, halfway between the howl of war and the quiet of the fire. And as we drift away from the story, we might hold on to one thought, that sometimes the strangest parts of the past are not about what really happened, but about what people believe could happen. And that is enough.